Hey guys, this is Nicole Van Tassel here with I Explore Science, and my mission is to make three-dimensional teaching and learning super easy and accessible and not as confusing as it was when I started my NGSS transition and journey and so on and so forth. So if you use the NGSS, then obviously you are doing three-dimensional teaching. But I know that sometimes, for many of us, honestly, in my state even, we have not yet adopted the NGSS. But that doesn't mean you cannot be using, 3D science and 3D methods of instruction, even with your existing state standards. So I just want to throw that out there. So today we're actually going to be talking about building your village. So developing supports at home for 3D science. This came about because it was actually part of our relationships and community workshop in the I Explore Academy NGSS distance learning course. But I think it's really important, even if you're not distance learning, this is something I hear from teachers again and again and again. I hear there's like a disconnect between what we're doing in the classroom with our students and what our parents understand that science instruction should be. And I think that this year with our classrooms in many ways, if you're doing hybrid or if you're doing any sort of remote, being moved into their homes, parents are really going to see, what their kids are doing day to day. And if we're not communicating what three-dimensional learning is, you might get a lot of pushback from parents, just like you get pushback sometimes from administrators who aren't fully on board or don't fully understand what three-dimensional teaching and learning is. So having that communication plan and identifying what should I be communicating to parents and how can I kind of get them on board so that they can support their students as we embrace all of the three dimensions and doing science and exploration and discovery and all of that. It's just really important. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so if you can hear me, let me know. First of all, if somebody could drop a note in the chat, just because I am using my microphone, but I muted the other systems, and I want to make sure that I'm not just talking and nobody can hear anything. So if you can hear me, if you can just drop a note in the chat, and we will continue, once I just get confirmation that my mic is working. It should be working. Let's see. I'm going to refresh. All right. Okay, good. Got confirmation. Good to go. Sorry for that little delay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't mute myself when you couldn't hear anything. Okay, so let's go ahead and now dive right in. Okie dokie. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about caterpillars for a minute. Okay, so I heard this actually a while ago, and I didn't really do any digging into it, but it popped up in my head as I was thinking about, this year, it's all just about, there's just so much change happening, right? Transitioning to the NGSS is all change, and this year, there's even more change. So anyway, really quickly about caterpillars. So caterpillars, the thing they wrap, and I didn't know this, and you might know it, but I did not know this. The thing that caterpillars, the chrysalis, that they are wrapped up inside before they become the butterfly, it is actually literally a part of it's they have this, okay, so basically they release this hormone and it causes them to cast off their own skin. And underneath of that skin, so it's kind of like a snake shedding. And I'll share this video where I learn all of this stuff at the end. It's a YouTube video. But the underneath that skin that they kind of shed is this kind of like a hard shell, the exoskeleton, it's kind of like an exoskeleton, but it's this hard shell, and that's what the actual chrysalis is made out of. Okay, so the chrysalis is literally part of their body. After that, and this part gets really gross, which we always think about butterflies as this beautiful transition, and they become a butterfly, and it's just lovely, and this is super gross though. They release these enzymes that literally rip apart and dissolve the cells in their muscles, in their digestive system, their guts, just all of their organs except a few key structures like breathing tubes. And then at that point, they have these other hormones that are typically kept at bay. Those hormones are gone now, so it causes these like discs to kind of wake up and take over. And those discs, there's maybe like, I don't know, there's a bunch of discs, I guess. I don't remember how many. But each of these discs contain the genetic information, that we have like to form individual body parts. So one disc has like maybe 50 cells, and then it splits into 1,000 cells to form a single wing. And then the butterfly splits, the chrysalis splits open. After like 2 weeks, the butterfly comes out. This gross like reddish liquid also apparently comes out. We're going to be raising butterflies with my kids soon, and I'm kind of going to keep an eye out for this. And that's all of like the waste that the caterpillar had generated in like the 2 weeks that it was inside this chrysalis. But then you have your beautiful butterfly, right? Okay. So, and then side note, this is just interesting. Studies suggest that butterflies can actually remember their caterpillar days. They did this thing where they like shocked caterpillars, which sounds really kind of sad and mean. I don't really like that. But they shocked caterpillars and they associated it with a scent. And they found that the butterflies, when they were like presented with that scent, would like go away and would like avoided the scent because they literally remembered at some, level their caterpillar days. Okay, weird. So anyway, why are we talking about butterflies? And it's kind of like beautiful, but it's also super kind of a gross process. Okay, so transitioning to the NGSS, whether you are a parent, a teacher, or a student, it doesn't just happen all at once. If you are in this process, you know this. And if you're farther along, you've had those like aha stages where you know, like I'm constantly growing and I might not know everything right now, but like I'm just going to reach that next aha. When you're just starting out, sometimes it feels like there's so many things and you're never going to get it all. And it's messy and it's just overwhelming and yeah. And it feels like you should be able to just be like, I'm a 3-dimensional teacher. I got this NGSS stuff down. I did like one lesson and I'm good. But in reality, it's this big process that happens over time. So it's gonna take time. You're gonna have to become goo at some point or another. So I know that you guys are on different, you're all in different stages of your learning. I'd love to hear kind of where you are. If you are, maybe you're like a level 1 and you're just starting out and you're like metamorphosis, you're still like that squishy caterpillar kind of thing and just starting to shed your little exoskeleton, gross, weird skin thing. Or maybe you're 5 and you're finally emerging as like this 3-dimensional teacher and you're feeling confident in it and it's awesome. There's no right answer, no judgment. I'm just curious and nosy and I like to know these things. So I'd love to hear like what number you are. Would you rank yourself like a 1 just starting out or like a 5? Like I'm getting the hang of this 3D thing and putting it all together and I'm becoming my butterfly. But anyway, okay, so give you a second, drop some responses. I'm going to take a little drink. But the one thing I want, so we have some 2s here. Awesome, Valerie. And like, there's nothing wrong. I mean, like we've all been a 1. You can't get to 5 without becoming like a 1 or a 2, right? You're just starting. So for those of you who are Joyce, Valerie, if you are just like a 1 or a 2, just know that you don't have to put all the pieces together all at once. I think that is one thing that can be really overwhelming and this is going to tie into our communication with parents too. I promise we're getting there. But that can be really overwhelming for teachers thinking I need to do it all at once. You don't. You can take baby steps because again, you have these like aha moments where you're just like, oh, I get that piece now. And then you can integrate it. And it's not like a struggle when you do it in that way. It's just this like step-by-step transition and just this metamorphosis over time. Okay, so along those lines, just like the butterfly, it's really messy and it involves breaking down old ideas, like literally dissolving, maybe we're not dissolving like guts and things like that, but we are dissolving our own ideas of what are, as I'm Brittany level 1 right now, they're pushing you to squeeze in so much. It's so hard because you're balancing state testing, which might still be aligned to old standards with like new, it's like kind of a mess. But you are breaking down your old ideas and you are adopting these new ones and developing these new ones, growing these new ones. It's not even like adopting, it's growing these new ones. So you're kind of like that caterpillar. It takes time. So change is hard. It's hard as a teacher. And I think it's really important that we start remembering, like we know it's hard for our students too. We see them. But it's also hard for parents. And I think we don't always think about that because we think like, well, why do they care? I mean, obviously like we know why they care, but like why, let me do my thing. I'm the teacher. I know what I'm doing. I'm kind of know what I'm doing. I'm figuring this out, but like, I know I'm in the best interest of this child. Just let me do my thing, you know? But at the same time, I mean, like, as a parent, we are so invested in our children and we want the very, very best for them. And sometimes it makes people a little crazy. Like, no judgment there. Parents can be a lot. But it's really important to remember that parents have to adjust to this process too. And you have some parents that might just be like, totally whatever, you do your thing and I'm good with it. But then you do have some parents who are like, but this is not the way I learned, or this is all new to me too, and I don't know how I feel about it. And so that's why starting with communication and communicating with your parents is actually really important to getting your students to buy in, but also like encouraging your students to be successful and building that bridge between home and school, so that when your students are struggling with something in class, you're not getting a parent saying, oh, that's not how I learned it. You're getting a parent saying, this is tough, but, you know, let's figure it out because, hey, this is going to grow your brain, or whatever phrases you want to use or whatever, you know? Okay, so we want our parents to be on board with us, and that means that we have to communicate with them. Our students are going to struggle. Our parents are going to struggle too. There's a lot of moving pieces. But I want to talk about, so when we're communicating, we should be all pretty much on board, like communication is important. A couple things we want to avoid when we communicate with parents. First of all, one thing that I see that just some people do, not like teachers specifically, or just actually teachers probably are like the best at not doing this because we're used to taking complex topics and breaking them down for our students. But a lot of like experts tend to like use all the lingo, and whether it's like they want to sound smart, or it's just like a language you learn and you adopt. We can't use the lingo when we talk to parents. When I try talking to my husband about teaching or my work or anything, you know, and I'm using words like 3D and science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts, like, one, he doesn't understand any of it. Two, he like tunes me out because he doesn't understand any of it. And three, he kind of gets like a little bit pissy because he's kind of like, stop talking, I don't understand anything. You're just frustrating me. I don't know what you're talking about. This conversation sucks. And honestly, I would feel the same way like when we talk about his work and if he's using all this jargon about banking and rates and processors and I don't even know, like, I don't have any idea what he's talking about either. So there's not any communication happening. Like, he would be talking at me, I would be talking at him, and nobody has idea like what is happening in the middle. Communication is a two-way street. And we really need our message to like leave our mouths or fingertips or however we're communicating and be heard and understood by the parents. And for that reason, if you're using a lot of jargon, it's just going to tune them off or turn them away, or they're just not going to get it. They're not going to understand it. Maybe there's even a language barrier, and that makes it even worse. But they're just not going to be able to understand the meaning, even if they could very easily understand the concepts. So while there's nothing wrong with like maybe at some point you introduce some terms, you know, maybe you at some point provide a cheat sheet or provide, you know, little blurbs about what they're doing and like use the language of science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts and all of that. I would really highly encourage you to consider carefully choosing when you do that. Like the beginning of the year, when you just want to give them a feel for what they're going to be seeing in their classroom and how science this year is going to be different, that's probably not the most important time to like get into all of the jargon and the lingo, because they have so much else on their plate, whether it's like the actual just, you know, they're learning about your class stuff, but also dealing with technical stuff this year, or dealing with their schedules or work things or health issues. I mean, like, honestly, there's just a lot going on. And why do they need to know the vocabulary right now? Like, isn't it better to build those ideas first and then just have them understand that this is the concept, this is like how we're going to learn science this year in general, without being like all wrapped up in all of that lingo. You can add in that kind of lingo and those vocabulary terms later, just like we do with our students. We need to teach the concepts and the content, like the ideas first, and then you add in the vocabulary. So I would encourage you, whatever you're communicating with them, just speak as plainly as possible. Instead of, you know, science and engineering practices, who cares if you say science skills? Don't say scientific method. We've been through that. Don't say that. But say science skills or critical, like I don't know, everybody's pretty familiar with critical thinking skills. Or like doing science even. Like everybody kind of knows like, oh, doing science, like I'm doing science stuff. I might not know exactly what those science things are, but I get that my students are doing science stuff and not just reading a book or watching a video or whatever. So consider just speaking plainly. And then along those lines, you don't need to tell them everything. Like avoid overwhelming them early on. Not because they can't understand it, but just because throwing too much at anybody at one time is just overwhelming. Like you cannot, I don't want to say you can't, but it would be very difficult to grasp every single aspect of three-dimensional teaching and integrating phenomena and choosing anchors and integrating the practices and doing exploration and discovery and guiding meaning making and 3D assessments and like all of these things I'm listing to just all at once, like, hey, here's everything. Just learn, like, know it, learn it. Like, that's not how people learn or understand anything. So all of that at once is going to be overwhelming. And there's just no reason for that. So, and again, this year, like, there's lots of other things we're going to have to introduce. We're going to have to introduce, like, tech things, restrictions and policies and, how things are going to be different in the school in general. So what we do communicate to our students, it's really important that what we communicate is really what we want to communicate. So with, let me see. Okay. So, sorry, I didn't update the slide, although it's not that much important things. Okay. So we need to focus on what matters. So what does matter with that in mind? Okay, so what should we be emphasizing? First of all, I want to encourage you to emphasize your care for the student and that this is in your student's best interest right now. Parents are probably going to have the same reservations and objections about this way of teaching, this way of learning, these standards as you did. So just for fun, like what are some of the objections you had when you first learned about the NGSS? I'm going to list a bunch of them in a minute, but I just want to see like it's categories. Let's see if is your thing on my list. Let's play a little game because it's fun. And I'm in like a game mood today. So what were some of your reservations or objections when you like first learned about the NGSS, heard about the NGSS, started using the NGSS? Or, even your colleagues, like what do they say when they're not fully on board? It's pretty much always the same, like, handful of things I hear over and over. So I'm sure you guys are probably going to knock off some of the ones on my list. Well, more of the same. That one's I hear, like, a little bit, and I hear some people saying, oh, this is what we used to do, and then some people saying this is what we used to do, but I don't think they fully understand what we used to do. Or, like, I don't think they fully understand the NGSS, so they just think it's what they used to do. But I don't know. Some people might, it legit might be what they used to do. But I think sometimes people think, oh, it's the same, but it's really not the same, and they don't fully understand it. Don't fully understand those shifts. Another more of the same. That was not on my list. Dang, I need to update my list, apparently. So I had, where's all the content? Get that one a lot. There's no content, or it's too broad. Like, where's all the content? It's too broad, or it includes everything and includes nothing. It goes both ways. I've heard, like, how is this preparing them for college? I was worried the kids would not be, kids would not be ready, like, they haven't had the previous experience. And then also, like, how is this preparing them for college when they're going to have lectures and textbooks and things like that? And same thing, like, my kid's confused, they're struggling, this is too hard, they're not able to do this. These are all, like, the same things that we've probably thought at some point that the parents are going to think too. So what you can do, you can't necessarily always answer every single, like, one of those questions, but simply, like, emphasizing that you care about their kids just like they do. It's your mission that their students are not just learning these isolated facts, but they're actually becoming these, like, critical thinkers. They're becoming scientifically literate. Whether they become scientists or not, it's a skill that we need to have in the future, in today's world. That they're becoming independent learners. So yeah, if they go to college and they do have a lecture and they do have a textbook, and I mean, even if you are lectured your whole high school career, you go to college, it's still hard. They need to be able to learn independently. We're teaching them to do that in our NGSS classes. They're able to take new information and integrate it into their existing understanding so they can take new things that they learn and figure out how it fits into what they already know. And they can think critically when things don't fit. They are going to be more interested in science. They're going to see how it's relevant to the real world. And it's not just like stupid stuff in a textbook that they have to learn to check off the class list. That it's literally preparing them for college or post-secondary school or careers or whatever it is. Like my goal is not just to teach your kid science, but to make them all of these things: critical thinkers, scientifically literate, independent learners, able to integrate new information, interested in science, prepared for their careers in the future. All of that. Like, these are the same concerns your parents have, so do you for your students, for their children. So starting with that is going to just set the tone for the whole conversation and set the tone for all future communications, so that it's like, hey, we're on the same team here. Like in classroom management stuff, that's also just one of your goals. You just want to create this, like, we're on the same team. So emphasizing the benefits, this encouraging, just this open-minded like approach to it. And then looking at like, how is this, like, recognizing this year is going to look different. And like, how is it going to look different? So then what are the key things beyond I care about your kids and this is in their best interest, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that it's in their best interest, and everything we do is like serving them. What key things do we communicate beyond that? Because now we have to actually tell them about like the way we're teaching. Because if you only go that far, you've done what you've probably done every single year, but we haven't actually addressed the 3-dimensional instruction and how things are going to look a bit different. So first of all, what should you focus on? Phenomenon. Your parents need to know that the NGSS is phenomena-based, that these are real-world connections that their students are going to be investigating and looking into. The benefit of this is that your students are going to know why what they're learning is important. They're going to see the relevance of it. The thing that might surprise parents is that because it is phenomenon based, it's not just a bunch of random facts that students are learning. And there might be some facts that they remember learning in middle school or high school that you're not going to be learning in that unit because it doesn't relate to your phenomena. So I use this example a lot. In traditional middle school life science classes, we had students memorize all the organelles. In an NGSS classroom, we typically don't have them memorize every organelle because not every organelle is going to be relevant, like highly relevant to the phenomenon that you are investigating. And NGSS instruction is phenomenon based. So we really want our parents to understand, like, just because you learned all of the different types of weathering all at once in one unit, you might not see that in my class. We're going to instead investigate this specific, rock formation and understand how these specific acts of weathering formed that. And that's better than just abstractly memorizing like land formations or types of erosion or types of weathering or whatever, because your students are going to actually see it at work in the real world and see how it connects to the real world. So phenomenon-based is your first part. Exploration and struggle and meaning making. This is the second part. And this is where you want parents to buy into it, because they are the ones that are probably going to hear the complaints from their kids. They're going to hear like, this is hard. And obviously your job as a teacher is to help your students, to make it less hard by being there for them, by providing supports, by providing the encouragement and the feedback that gets them where they need to go. But there is some degree of work and struggle and figuring it out and making mistakes and all of those things. So this is important. And again, what you're communicating to parents, this is important because this is where those science and critical thinking skills are being honed. This is where they're being developed and fostered. This is where they are mastering those skills, because you can only master skills by actually doing them. You can't just like read about analyzing data and then know how to analyze data. You actually have to analyze data. So the struggle and the exploration is what is really, that's where your students are learning. And beyond like mastering the science skills, this is actually improving. This is making them independent learners. This is growing their brain. This is, go back to looking at the whole brain science thing we did last week. I talked a little bit about this. And we talked about in how to anchor if you participated in that training that we will actually be doing again in at the end of the month. Next month. I can't remember. Sometime soon. But anyway, the exploration, the struggle, the meaning making, your parents need to know that's where things are going to look different. So because they need to know that's where things are going to look different, you also need to make sure they like understand. Like if I say exploration, struggle, meaning making, I know what that means. You maybe know what that means. I hope you know what that means. If you don't, it's okay. It's still all in the process. It took me a long time to figure out what exploration really was. Our parents are probably not going to necessarily know what that means. Like exploration to them could be I'm going on Google and searching for an answer. That's not exploration. That is Googling an answer. So examples, right? So you might give them examples of like what they will see and what they won't see. So it might not seem like the teacher is teaching. This is one thing I hear, a complaint I hear from teachers all the time. Their students complain, you're not teaching us. But that's okay because you're not going to see like the traditional teaching, like leaning heavily on textbooks or lecture or notes, vocabulary flashcards, or like traditional matching, fill in the blank, multiple choice quizzes. You're not going to see like a lot of answers coming from the teacher. But even with that, your kids are the ones that are learning, and they're the ones that are understanding and building the framework for their learning. So the things that you are going to see and that are going to be proof that your students are learning, you're going to see them doing more. You're going to see them actually asking the questions and coming up with their ideas and testing those ideas, creating their own experiments or building their own models. You're going to see them manipulating simulations to do the same thing. Let's say it's virtual, You're going to see them making sense of those things that they observe to construct their own explanations. They're going to be doing a lot of talking, whether it's in a Zoom meeting or it's in discussion boards. What the parent would see would not necessarily be in your classroom. They are going to be doing like talking and arguing their points and then revising their ideas. So they're going to see wrong ideas. Your parents are going to see their kids with wrong ideas initially, because in an NGSS classroom, our goal is not to immediately fix an idea by simply telling a student, no, that idea is wrong in your notebook. Please fix it. I'm going to tell you the correct idea, and then you're going to copy it down and spit it back to me. No, our goal is, okay, that's your idea right now. Let's investigate this. Let's test it out. Let's see if that idea holds up to our exploration, what we're going to do next. And then going back and revising it. Parents need to be aware, like, yeah, your kid has something written down in their notebook and it's wrong, but we're going to fix it. Don't worry. It's part of the learning process. They're going to see that the teacher is challenging student ideas. So one of the concerns of an iExplore Academy member earlier in the spring was like, I want to send a response to this student and be like, well, what do you think? But I'm concerned that the parents are going to be like, well, why isn't she just telling them the answer? So you give them a heads up, let them know, like, I'm going to say things like, well, what do you think? Like, tell me more about this. Why did you explain it that way? Because our goal, again, is for students to make the meaning and come to the conclusions. And it's going to help them in the end. These are all skills that are going to be helpful in science, sure, but they're going to be helpful just across the board in any discipline, these critical thinking, communication, and all of that. So this is all benefiting the student, but it just is going to look different. And if you communicate those things up front, then you're just going to get less pushback, because it's not like, well, why didn't the teacher correct this? It's, oh, maybe you haven't gotten to correct it yet. And maybe you can even give the parents language like, well, what do you think? Does that hold up? Are you sure about that? If they want to be involved in the process, so that they don't just turn it into, well, the teacher is not teaching, so I'm going to tell you the correct way. That was my mean, gruff voice. Anyway, so 3D instruction isn't new to the pandemic, and it's not going away after the pandemic. This is just a shift in education. It's been happening in the science disciplines, obviously, since the framework were released and the next generation standards were created or developed. But really, I think the vanguard of teachers in a lot of other disciplines are starting to move toward these constructivist approaches to education as well, because we've recognized this factory feeding of information to students and spitting them out into the world is not really preparing them for the demands of our world today. These, stand and lecture type of learning is not giving our students the critical thinking and creativity and collaboration skills and all of that. We don't want them to just regurgitate facts to us. We want them to actually use their brains and solve problems and make connections and all of that. So if we can really team up with parents to help, to have them help us help their kids, then we're really just going to be preparing those students for the future is even better than we could, alone. But parents who were raised in who went through a very different education system, they don't know what that's supposed to look like or what it looks like at all. They just know what they went through. So it's really important that we communicate that. So I hope these ideas have given you a starting point about connecting with parents and what you should be communicating. Again, that the phenomena and then the idea of this exploration and the struggle toward meaning making and using examples to really present that is where you want to focus, at least up front. You can always add in all the jargon stuff later, but you want them to just understand how it looks different. There are some good resources on the NGSS website. There's a parent guide. That's a really great one. You could take bits and pieces of that. I think it's more meaningful if it comes from you in your words rather than just giving them the parent guide, because they might just be like, oh, this is just a flyer that the teacher handed out to me or emailed to me. Whereas if it's a letter or an email directly from you and you highlight some of these things, I just think it's more meaningful. But if you are interested in learning more about building your community with your class and with parents and outsiders and all of that, you can absolutely do so in iExplore Academy's NGSS distance learning course. We just wrapped that up this month with our assessment strategies for online instruction. And then as always, you are invited to continue working and learning with me through one of my several programs. The free Kickstart AHA course provides you with the basics of 3D instruction and phenomenon-based storylines. So if we were going through this and you're like, oh, I don't really know that I know what a storyline is, or I don't really know that I totally get this 3 dimensions or what I'm doing with phenomena, check that out. It's a really good starting point. I have my complete iExplore Academy PD program where I walk you through developing your 3-dimensional lessons and unit storylines and then implementing all of those on the day-to-day through this exploration and discovery and student meaning making and all of that. And like I said, we have a lot of there's been over this summer, our whole community has just really focused on supporting our teachers who are transitioning to distance learning. So there's the whole NGSS distance learning course that's been added as well. It's about 5 workshops. And then as always, your school or district programs, I'd love to work with your school on developing curricula or just providing workshop support, yada, yada, basically to help your team, jumpstart its transition to 3D teaching and learning and all of that. So I apparently talked with my hands really, really well because I just got my 9,000 steps and I didn't move for the last half an hour. So I guess that's the perk of talking with your hands. I thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope, this is a good start to get you started on building that bridge between your classroom and the work that your students are going to be doing at home by making that connection with your parents. Reach out if you have any questions, and I will catch you guys later. Have a wonderful Monday.